Hi class, hope everyone's doing well. I just wanted to quickly go over week 3 and what's going to be expected for week 3. Real quick, just to recap week 2. So hopefully you had a good review over control statements. So in using control statements within C++, you should have gone over loops, the different types of loops, for loops, while loops, do while loops. You should have gone over if statements, else statements, nested if statements, using if statements within loops, loops within loops, etc. You also should have gone over logical operators and how to use them within the conditions of while statements or maybe the conditions of if statements. So you should have used this and also seen this in the lab as well. So in this week we're going to go over functions and recursion. So we've been using functions sort of informally in the past weeks. And you also should have seen it in your prior C++ course, introductory course. And functions basically they execute some task, right? They might have inputs, they might produce an output, right? They perform some functionality. They're important for code reuse, and they're important so you don't have redundant code as well. So there are many concepts around functions. So this involves function prototypes, function scopes, the scope of variables, local variables versus global variables, function call stack, inline functions, and function templates. So we'll be going over all of these concepts here in week 3. You'll also be going over passing arguments by value versus by reference, and also go over recursion. Recursion is the idea of calling a function within itself. Okay, there's different times you may want to use recursion versus using iteration. So it's good to understand this. So we'll be using these different concepts in the lab as well. So there'll be a lab 3 that's going to be assigned this week. You'll have 2 weeks to complete lab 3. So it'll be due March 10th. You'll also have quiz 3. So you're still going to have weekly quizzes, one quiz per week. The quiz is going to be about 35 questions, and you'll have 150 minutes, about 2.5 hours to complete. So you'll be reading chapter 6, which is on functions and introduction to recursion. You also have many different links, additional resources that you should look through. I highly recommend that you do as much practice as you can, especially with topics such as recursion, as to really get a good understanding and grasp these concepts. It's important to just practice, right? Actually write code to use these concepts. So in order to do this, you can do these self-review exercises in the back of the chapter 6. At the end of chapter 6, there's many different review exercises. I recommend that you attempt all of them if you can. The more practice, the better. And if you're looking for solutions, you get stuck, or you have any questions about these review exercises, please don't hesitate to reach out or post in the discussion. Okay, so again, you'll be you'll have lab 3, which will be assigned this week but due in 2 weeks. So this means that lab 3 will be a bit longer, so I recommend that you do start early. Even though you have 2 weeks to complete it, I highly recommend that you start very early, as it is going to be longer. Okay, so let's go over more ideas around week 3. Okay, so we've gone over overview of module 3. I recommend that you read through this overview here. It kind of goes in a little bit more detail, highlighting the major concepts you'll be learning about in chapter 6 here in week 3. So the assigned reading is all of chapter 6, every section within chapter 6. Here are PowerPoint slides that will be available for you to review as well. And then additional practice, which is mostly the self-review exercises in the back of chapter 3 at the end of chapter 6. And there's also solutions to a few of those exercises to kind of get you going on the right track. And again, you have to complete quiz 3, which will be due in a week on March 3rd, and lab 3, which will be due in 2 weeks. However, I highly recommend that you start as soon as possible because it will be a longer lab. So let's actually go over lab 3. Okay, here's lab 3. So you'll be tasked to write a real estate program. So basically, just imagine that you are writing a program where you need to help estimate or track real estate property. Okay, so The idea here is that you're going to declare real estate property class. It's going to have member variables. I'm going to have member functions. Just make sure you address every single point, one by one, seen in this lab description. Okay, so you want to make sure you address every single point one by one in order. Okay, you have to do constructors. Have a toString method. You're going to want to calculate the mortgage given a set of inputs, and this is the equation to calculate the mortgage. Additionally, you'll overload this function to include the number of years, so as an input for which the loan will be you'll be paying the loan. So you also need to calculate the total monthly cost, which will consider the mortgage along with additional payments such as the HOA payment. And then you're going to create a main function for this real estate program. So the main function will be within the main.cpp file. You'll have your regular main function, and in this you're going to kind of use the different you're going to use the real estate property class to implement different functionality. So you'll be also creating local functions within this main.cpp file, and calculate monthly interest is one of them, which is going to be simply given an annual interest rate, calculate the monthly interest rate by dividing it by 12. And you'll ask the user to enter in 2 different real estate properties and store these values inside a real estate property object for each. And you're also going to declare this find_min function, which is going to be a function template. So remember, a function template is going to allow you to pass in values or variables of different types. So then you're going to want to use this find_min function to pass in the real estate property object's name for each real estate property and be able to return the minimum name. And this is pertaining to a string. So when you're talking about a minimum string, you're saying it starts with a letter. It's in alphabetical order. So an A will be smaller than a B, right? Or a B will be smaller than a C. So so you want to use this find_min function to actually print out the 2 real estate property objects in alphabetical order based on their name or identifier. And remember, the user is going to enter these 2 properties. Okay, so then you want to ask the user to enter the down payment amount that they're willing to pay along with the annual interest rate. And you're going to use this to calculate the monthly interest rate based on the annual interest rate, right, that the user enters. And this is a function that's going to be defined within the main file. And then you're going to want to make the necessary function calls to actually get and store the monthly mortgage cost for each of the 2 real estate properties. Okay, and you're going to use the function that assumes 360 months. So it does not have input in where you pass in the number of months you will be paying the loan. You're not going to use that function. You use the function that does not have this as an input and assumes 360 months. Okay, and then you're going to use the same find_min function to print out the real estate property that has the lowest monthly mortgage cost. Okay, so again, you're going to use that same find_min function. Because it is a function template, you're going to demonstrate that you can not only pass in strings, but pass in numeric types as well. Okay, so then you're going to want to get and store the total monthly cost. So before we were doing the total monthly mortgage cost. So now you're going to do the total monthly cost, which is a different function, and then also assume now you're paying the loan for 180 months. So you're no longer assuming 360 months. Okay, and then you're going to again use that same find_min function to print out the real estate property, which has the lowest monthly cost, lowest total monthly cost. And to print out the real estate property, you want to make sure you use the object's toString function, which you'll define in a previous part of the lab. Okay, then you're going to implement some recursive functions. So one is going to, the first one is going to actually a recursive function that calculates the value of a home after so many years, given its rate and the number of years that you want to estimate the value or price. as well as the current price. Okay, so this is all described here. You're going to use recursion to actually compute this. Okay, and you want to demonstrate it working properly by simply calling this function and passing in the appropriate values in your main.cpp file. Okay, and you're going to write an additional recursive function. This is kind of separate from the real estate property class, or I'm sorry, the real estate property program. This is sort of separate, but however, you're going to put this still in the main function of the main.cpp file. And you're just going to write a recursive function that calculates an exponential function, so base to some exponent value. And this is going to be the format of that function, and you should determine how you should create this function in order to make it recursive and still be able to calculate the exponential function. Okay, you want to demonstrate this working properly by passing in values to this function, and again within the main.cpp file in the main function. So you want to make sure that it is important that you make sure you include white space and commenting to kind of separate all these different subtasks, right? You want to make it very clear, readable, and easy to see the different tasks, subtasks within the program. Okay, one important thing also, I've noticed that some of you were making a lot of your variables start with uppercase letters. Be sure that the variables start with lowercase letters. So that's the kind of practice that we're going to be using throughout this class. You want to make sure all of your variables start with lowercase letters, and functions as well start with lowercase letters. And the class name should start with uppercase letters, and then your constants should be all uppercase letters. Okay, again, be sure to include white space throughout your code, separating blocks, executing different subtasks of the lab of this program. So again, make it very clear, easy to read, and comment throughout all of your code, as well as include your header at the top of each file. And again, yes, be sure to comment through all of your code. Okay, and then submit it as usual. Make sure you have these 3 files. Make sure your commented header is at the top of each file, which can include the name of the file, your name, the date it was created, and the description of the file. Okay, and again, as always, read through the lab assignment grading rubric, as this is going to be how I grade your lab. Okay, so I hope all this makes sense. Read through this lab very carefully. Read through it once, twice, as many times as needed until it all makes sense. If anything is confusing or troubling, please reach out to me or post on the general questions discussion board, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.